But you admit it's one problem.
Sure.
Good evening and welcome to the August 3rd, 2021 Northern Lebanon School District Committee meeting. I call this meeting to order. This meeting is being recorded. Thank you for joining us this evening. Mrs. Martin, may I have a roll call, please?
Yes. Gray. Erdman.
Here.
Fowler.
Here.
Marlowe.
Here.
Murray.
Here.
Klein. DeKallik. Nom.
Present.
Bucks.
Here.
Directors Gray and Klein absent. All other members are present.
Thank you. I would like to publicly announce that the board will meet in executive session immediately following this meeting to discuss personnel matters. Moving on to item 2, that is the adoption of the agenda. May I have a motion to adopt the agenda as presented?
Motion to adopt the agenda as presented.
May I have a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? This is a unanimous roll call vote. Your vote will be recorded in the affirmative unless you say nay or I abstain. The motion has passed. Moving to item 3, we have a presentation this evening by Crabtree Rohrbach and Associates on our ongoing building projects. We have Scott Cousins. Welcome.
Check.
So as you well know, we received bids for the construction of an elementary school. Overview of the bidding climate and Hi, good evening, everyone. Everyone's doing well. So by now, you know the bids are a little high. Obviously, this responsibility standpoint, like one of the things we take, have we done enough advertising? Have we project out to the street? Gotten all the people in the marketplace be interested in the project so that and on bid day reflect the sum of the market out there. And great team effort. Got 3 bidders on the general and the electrical. Really across the boards with all of them. We got all of the people type of project. We're going to go into the numbers. That's going to go into the numbers. But not only do we get bidders, the numbers were tight. Might have gotten 3 bidders. Number one really high number and a number in the middle. And some people might be satisfied with that and just say, okay, well, the number in the middle is probably, our industry was the lowest responsible number, which is shows up for the bond on bid day. But the numbers were close. Generally, you had one contractor who was from that. That was a little high, but the other mechanical, as you can see, that says, I don't even know if we've ever had that many bidders. I mean, similar, like great competition, numbers super tight. Electrical, 3 again, but the numbers were really tight. Large electrical. Felt we done more that way. So again, from your standpoint, from a responsibility support, I think you can be confident that that exists in the market as it exists today. Really, a couple of bullet points, but I'm not going to stand here. It'll always be easier to answer questions than to just pontificate about what's going on in the marketplace. Out there right now, yes, material costs have risen. Budget. I mean, maybe perhaps some of the reasons. Budget. Size projects area come in and they've come in. But prices have been on the rise. We don't see from our standpoint, and we have projects rolling in. any indication in a macro, prices are going to be down in the future. If you ask most people, have a hand, things may moderate at the same point, but the idea of coming down. The other, and I don't think it's covered in here for this. The other issue we affected manpower to a lesser degree, and I say to a lesser degree, I say a lesser degree. Other industries know that getting people to whatever skill, it's hard to get manpower in many industries. We have it in our industry as well. The bigger driver's problem is supply chain issues. Again, you've probably heard this ad nauseum. Supply chain, we see production. Another concern I'd have if I were you, what does this mean for our project going forward? We're going to run into. Yes, you're going to run into issues because our industry and what we're seeing. However, from liability or claims, have many projects that were different situation. Documents that address say that because COVID months ago and it's extrapolating out now, but figured out how to survive in it. So that's really all I had to say. That piece, just to kind of give a general. And I did. We've talked our firms. We also spoke. Same kind of thing. It's comfortable with the bid. I've been really disappointed if we got one. Tight numbers, and they also are tight. Echo one of any over. A lot of those. Should be time to go over the actual bid result. When I talk about base bid, separate price either. Now comparing that. Two numbers.
So overall, the base bid. I will note that's still 4 limits. I talked about deductions.
I made them, but just to kind of highlight them. You have experience with each of the factors who are low, factor a low bar, tremendous amount. Factor, and some of which Crabtree, well, own entities. However, Scott did mention we met diligence. We met with person also. I touched on something I think is important. You know, when numbers came in high, our first reaction was not how to explain it, but like part of the project. But no matter how we sliced and diced that, there was no logic and chance of getting a better result. I don't want you to think we automatically start explaining, well, why are the numbers high and have an explanation. Oh, it's like, how do we bring it back under budget is really.
So we talked before we went out to bid that had quite a few all. Alternate list. Understand that. And I want to note something. Hasn't meant much. So this was one of the
Scott, while it's on that
Yes.
picture, a couple of things I want to draw attention to. Due to some shading things, the red brick in some earlier photos looked very, very light, and we had asked to color in the red brick a little darker. When that happened, I think the gray brick became a little darker also than what it would really be, correct? In addition to that, like at the front, you can see some of the banding in this picture in the red brick. That continues throughout the building, although you can't really see it in the in that first slide. And then in addition to that, there'll be some landscape. It's not going to come flat. It's not going to look like a Lego that comes flat down to the ground either. So I think some of that needs to be kept in mind. And the other thing that needs to be kept in mind is that if the board is really in love with the blue and the gold, this is a lot of work that Brad and I and Scott and Fidavia put into looking at this. We tried different combinations. We looked at a lot of things. It was really hours worth of time. But I know that there was a concern about it looking institutional at one point. And, you know, this is what we looked at and thought I think I'm okay with it. We're okay with it. It's a substantial amount of money. However, this is, you know, at the end of this or between now and next Tuesday when we vote, that's when we have to have the discussion to say, you know what, I'd really like to keep this, or I'd really like to add this. So it's not final until next Tuesday. I want to make that clear. So if you have, you know, input on it, we can still take that. But we did spend quite a bit of time taking a look at it. And due to some of the costs, these are some ways that we can save some money.
Another
I think maybe a picture of, do you have a picture of a building that you used it on that, or rather than this computer generated, I get, but a real picture that we could share this week, that might help. We've seen the real sample as well, which also maybe might help. The banding.
What is the cost difference to keep the gray versus just going all red? This image, it may be a little more. If
Building of this size and draw, we want to make sure all one color. That's
Thank you.
one of the Majority of the cost of that was.
I think it's nice. I just don't know if it's necessary, I think it's nice, but I don't know if it's necessary, I think is where I'm kind of sitting on the fence with that. Like, I mean, it's a bonus, but anywhere I've ever played, when I was thinking back to high school or just on sports, the elevated always had the seating as well, just so that you could see. And if we can't really do that, then we kind of break that beneficial of seeing down as a viewing point. So.
That allows us to do.
So that's in addition to the 500,000 on the, okay.
Is there any risk as these prices continue to increase that we would see that come back to us? Or these are fixed bids? If stainless goes up by 40%, they eat it.
And that's all tied to the project completion date, right? So they won't postpone doing something for our building because we're not paying the higher price for it, or they can get a higher price on another project. Okay.
I get that we probably will not see prices drop much. I would agree with that. But if they do, is there any remedy where, because I assume these bids are high and higher than you expected because they're trying to cover themselves. They know this is a volatile market and these prices, just like the stainless they saw jumped up again, that they bid with cushion in there. Is there any remedy if we do see miraculously that stuff comes down, that, or is that just in their pocket? Yep. Right.
That's not gonna happen.
I don't think they really. Again, there isn't part of the low number.
Mm-hmm. But it did surprise you that they were all so high, right? Kind of.
Yeah, I mean, I've been seeing first elsewhere. Been on months. Thought we would be a little tight
Mm-hmm.
because we have. I don't think this because
Mm-hmm.
As we walk through this process with the township, we know that they might request us to do some work that's going to cost us a potentially significant amount. Are any of those things that we think they might ask us to do, are they projected in these costs?
So, yeah, so when we times and had many have like this.
And to be clear, those were not in when he showed the difference between the percentage of the Act 34 meeting. At the Act 34 meeting, they were not in. However, the last estimate was that June, maybe, right before it went out to bid, they were included into that.
You said, Dan, you said that I think both of you have had experience with low bar. Is that correct? Okay, okay, great. So if I look at their portfolio on the website, you were involved in those school projects. I'm just curious if this is representative of the work that you have done with them. Okay.
Thank you so much. Moving on to item 4, this is our public comment session. Those wishing to make public comment were asked to submit that request by 4 o'clock this evening. Tonight, we have one request for public comment. That is from Mrs. Rachel Murphy. Mrs. Murphy, please come to the podium. Please state your name and address before speaking, and you have 4 minutes to speak. Thank you, Mrs. Murphy. Dr. Messinger, I think that so next week would be about 3 weeks before the start of school. Could you bring us the data that you have and the knowledge of what you know about what the other schools in Lebanon County are doing? And to open up the conversation of if you think our health and wellness plan is sufficient to protect our kids moving forward. Thank you. The minutes shall note that public notice was given for the meeting in accordance with Act 84 of 1986. Notices and advisements of these meetings will carry the intent that limited business may be conducted on any scheduled meeting date. Moving to item 6, we do have a couple items for board action this evening. Dr. Messinger will introduce those before we take a.
Yeah, surprisingly, the first one is a construction item. We had a change order. As you know, the subcommittee can approve change orders up to 40,000. And one of the things that came to light through our contractor was actually about lights. And the benefit of purchasing the lights now and doing some installation of those lights while we have things torn up, including running some conduits, running the electrical wire up the light and getting those up to be, just to make a clear picture, those lights won't be connected. Eventually they would be connected to the new field house. So they're going to look pretty, but we're actually not going to be able to use them. I joked with Mason that we were going to get him a bike to pedal to light up the lights, but it makes some sense. It saves us a little bit of labor and some costs to get them installed while we're doing phase 1 here instead of phase 2. In reality, you're talking about purchasing now rather than purchasing them in the spring. So I don't, there's not a huge delay there, but we could get them, get the bases in, get the lights up, get the conduit run and the electrical wire run now, and take care of it in this phase. Did I miss anything? Okay.
Are there any questions on that proposed change order?
I had a question. I don't know who to ask it of, but the question is, when will the field be fully ready for competition and play? I believe it'll be ready perhaps a week before the first scheduled game. Then a follow-up question is, what sort of safety inspection is done to make sure that the field is fully safe for the athletes that are going to be on it?
And you may not know that date, maybe you do, but I think we're getting a new timeline on Monday at our meeting with an updated time frame. We've had some rain. We did have some difficulty with getting some materials, to be honest. ECI actually took a truck down in North Carolina, and we found, with the help of Fidavia, found the materials we needed. They drove down, they came back overnight. We're here in the morning. And then we found some additional material in Ohio. Mason took a trailer, left at 4 o'clock in the morning, drove to Worcester, Ohio, put everything on the trailer, brought it back. Yeah. And so we're in good shape in terms of the materials, we believe, at this point. And they were putting the stone down today on the practice field, which is a good sign because the next piece is the turf. So we will have a new timeline. Then there's 2 completion dates. There's a substantial completion date. When substantial completion is reached, we can play on the field. And then there's a final completion, and that's going to involve the landscaping and some other items that, work will continue, but we can still utilize the field. As far as the safety, and I will tell you, that's going to butt up pretty close to the first game at this point. As far as the safety inspection, Scott, yeah.
Sure. I don't have the specification. What's called.
Are there any other questions? Hearing none, may I have a motion to accept the change order committee's recommendation to accept pending change order 2 for field lighting? May I have a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? This is a unanimous roll call vote. Your vote will be recorded in the affirmative unless you say nay or I abstain. The motion has passed. We have a second item for board action.
Yeah, and this is an employment item, so I'm going to take this opportunity to introduce our human resources person. For those of you that haven't met her, Mrs. Lauren Bruce has joined us tonight back there, and she has hit the ground running. with both human resources and communications. How many things did you want to correct on the website? What are we up to? 4,267. Okay. And so we appreciate her getting in. And she is one of our newest residents of Northern London School District. Her and her husband moved into Jonestown last Thursday, and they have two kids that will be attending Jonestown Elementary. So I'm glad to have them in the district as well. But I told her I would not make her do the narrative on the employment. We do have a full-time custodian that we'd like to hire. She has been a substitute for us and went through an interview process, and we'd like to hire Hannah in that full-time custodian position.
Are there any questions on that item? May I have a motion to approve the employment of Hannah Billack as full-time custodian? May I have a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? This is a unanimous roll call vote. Your vote will be recorded in the affirmative unless you say nay or I abstain. The motion has passed. Then we move into our items that will be on our consent calendar or are proposed for the consent calendar next week. Item 7.1 through 7.3, Dr. Mess.
Our typical items there are approval of minutes from the last meeting, our student activity account, and our cash disbursements.
Are there any questions on those items? All right, moving ahead to item 8, that is budget and finance.
Yeah, several items there. Our annual Title III agreement with the IU and our district. Our list of bus drivers from DB Fisher and also bus stops. Those bus stops, I will note, are changing on a daily basis due to enrollments and some other factors. But they are, we're pretty close to being done, at least it'll continue to change, but we're pretty close to being done, and letters are soon going out too, correct? So we're in better shape than we have been the last few years. In addition to that, this is a resolution that was adopted earlier in the year. However, there was a dollar amount that was rounded to the nearest dollar that should not have been. It should be dollars and cents. So that was corrected. And so we're going to adopt that correction. And then also we had, this was something we had talked about, a little more accountability for our purchases locally to be able to use a card to go and take care of those purchases rather than reimbursing or using cash in certain places.
Are there any questions on those items? All right, moving ahead to buildings and grounds.
Yeah, that is the current language for the bid adoption approvals. If we change something with, say, the gray brick, or we decide to keep something, or we add in the viewing area, those numbers would change between now and next week. But that is with the deductions and everything that we had talked about tonight, those would be the final amounts.
Are there any questions on those items? I have one question, actually. Assuming that we approve all of these bids next week, when do we break ground or kind of get over there and start moving forward?
Kind of the schedule of events that happen after. Our next day will. That means As far as breaking ground, a site work that has to
I believe that's what we have to work on now. We have, long story short, beginning of September-ish. Is that?
Yeah, that's what
Okay. Yeah, Dan.
Oh, yeah, yeah. It's also conditional.
August 12th.
And we do.
All right, just clarity on these numbers, they have the deductions out of them already, or this have everything still in it?
There are, and I just want to be clear that the brick was not the only deduction. There were other deductions that we took out. And for the record, there were some safety items we left in that were alternates. This includes the deductions that we went through, including the colored brick, and does not add in the viewing area. Right.
Okay.
But
So if we-
I'd also note that Scott mentioned $300,000 of savings in value engineering, or I forget what term you gave it, but that is not included in the bid
Right,
amounts.
that'd be a
That would be
post-bid.
post-change or post-bid
Right,
approval
right.
change order process.
Yes, what I heard was a guaranteed 300,000 savings that Fidavia would give if. So I wrote that down. Yep. Yeah. Okay, so that's that piece. I would just say for the record that the in or out piece, I don't know how we do that before next week, if there's discussion on that or not. I don't have an opinion one way or the other, unless it impacts student outcomes in some way. The colors and the aesthetics to me.
You're not going to look up research studies on blue
And it's
brick on the outside.
right. I'm not going to look at that. You guys can. But the percentage too, although it's, there's some big numbers in the grand scheme of things, it's a percent,
Right.
in the grand scheme of things. So if it's what
I think the
we
question
think it
really
would be,
for the,
then you go with it.
the question for the board that I need to know is, how much of a discussion do you want to have next week? Does anyone feel really strongly, man, that's a deal breaker for me? I really like that, or, or could we discuss it? We can always come into this and then revise the amount at the meeting based on that if we need to. But I need to have a feel from everyone. If there's something that you saw tonight that, I really am interested in this, and then we have the discussion of the board, and then the board decides one way or the other to put it in or to not put it in.
Yeah.
And I can give a general feel for. go
On
ahead.
some of the big ticket items, like obviously changing from gray to the regular brick, like they would need to know that in advance to get you some of those numbers so you could put them
Yeah.
on the agenda. So if there are big areas that you want to know pieces of information, you guys need to know that in advance. So the board needs to speak up so they can start doing their homework.
I think the things that we need to, potential discussions are really the glazed brick, the viewing area, and whatever we come up with between the red brick and the gray brick.
The red versus gray. Alternates what Jim was blue. Go in a different direction. And not accept that. Alternates that you have in front of you.
Gary, I didn't hear when you said about the viewing area and the bricks. Do you need to know next week, like if I'm against the viewing area? So is that something you would need to know, or is that something further down the
The
line?
viewing area is not in. I only need to know if someone feels they really want the viewing area. The viewing area is currently not, we did not add the viewing area. I like the viewing area, but at that cost, it was a substantial amount of money. Although the yoga area sounded great.
I think the main thing that I would like to see is just an image to get a feel for how gray that brick is. If we could see that beforehand, that would be great.
Any other questions on that one? Okay. You want to go to 10?
Yep, we'll move to extracurricular.
Okay, we have our annual ag department trip to Indianapolis on there. We also had an assistant coach, football coach, who is going to change to a volunteer, and therefore we had an opening for a paid position. So it's to approve Mark Rice as the paid assistant varsity football coach. And then our annual high school, middle school co-curricular activity payments were updated, and those are listed there as well.
Any questions on those items?
I assume that assistant coach number is the same number for the other guy. No change on the,
I'll double check it
I didn't even notice that until just now, but
before next
that's fine.
next week. I'll double check that. I believe it is, just
Okay.
recollecting, but I did not look at the passport agenda.
I just want to comment that then a few years ago, I went out to the National FFA Convention as a speaker there myself, and it's a pretty exciting time. So I'm excited to see our students going there. Do they raise the money themselves?
Student activity account? Yeah.
Okay, great. Any questions on those items? All right, we have no items for curriculum this evening, but we do have several in human relations.
Yeah, we have our 2021-22 substitute list, at least the start of one, as no names always are added throughout the year. We believe we will have a name for you for our long-term math substitute for math at the 10th meeting on the 10th. We have a list of teachers that are getting tenure this year. We also have our annual 2021-22 IU13 flight team. That team is, if there's a crisis in a different school district, we send a team of people or an individual to help support students and or faculty if something would occur. We also have our mentors listed for our new teachers for this year as well.
Are there any questions on those items? All right, item 13 is are a few informational items. And then moving, did you want to say anything about those?
No, nothing in particular. Our annual summer cleaning, we always try to go through the books, comb through books, and then we donate those to book savers, ones that are old and are not being used. We have our student teaching list, and also our mental health teams are listed there as well.
And lastly, we have one item proposed for discussion next week.
Yeah, and Ms. Martin could not be here with us. She had a personal commitment that she couldn't be here tonight. I just wanted to update you that you have on the agenda a request for a tax waiver. She will be meeting with or is attempting to meet with that representative of Sharon Mennonite this week. When she sets up that time, We'll invite, if someone from the board would like to attend, certainly welcome to do that. In addition, she has called, talked to someone at the county today. She's also has another phone conversation coming up with a different person at the county. And then I tasked her with presenting the board with what the options are. This is another, okay. With what the options are for next week. To be honest, I am not opposed next week to having a discussion. And if we don't vote on it yet and want more information, then we have every right to do that. I believe this is a decision we don't want to take lightly. And you know, if it takes another month till September, then that's fine. But if you have any questions in the meantime, including, I think Michelle had sent some numbers from last time, but I want to get updated numbers on what that tax amount is and get those values to you. If you have any other questions in the meantime, shoot them my way or tell me now, I'll write them down so that we can make sure we have all that information in one place for you so you guys can talk about it next week.
The only request I would have is, to the extent there's representations made about what the county or the state says, that this may be an implied task, but I'd like a legal analysis of whether that's a correct representation.
Okay.
Are there any other questions on that item? Is there any new business for discussion this evening?
Not new business, but Dr. Messinger, I answered my own question. It is the same compensation. So I apologize. You don't have to work.
Anything else for this evening? May I have a motion to adjourn? May I have a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? This is a unanimous roll call vote. Your vote will be recorded in the affirmative unless you say nay or I abstain. The motion has passed. This meeting is adjourned. Have a good evening, everyone.